Okay, so let's keep going with this. So just to kind of revisit this quote, because it's tough. Socrates says, "Are you and I expected to praise the sentiments of the author, or only the clearness, roundness, finish, and tenure of the language?" Plato. This is what Socrates says in Phaedrus, written by ancient Greek philosopher Plato. In other words, he's asking, are we expected to praise the idea of the essay, or are we supposed to praise the organization, the language, the words, the examples? He says, "As to the first, I willingly submit to your better judgment, for I am not worthy to form an opinion, having only attended to the rhetorical matter." So, like Socrates, by the way, I'm gonna let you know a little spoiler, is joking. So he says, "I don't know whether the ideas are good. I submit to your better judgment, Phaedrus, for I'm not worthy to form an opinion." So he says, "I don't know if what he's saying is true. I'm going to leave that up to you, Phaedrus." He says, "I was only paying attention to the rhetorical matter." Now, I hope you remember the definition of the word rhetoric, but if you forgot the definition of the word rhetoric, I will give it to you again. Rhetoric is persuasive language. So he says, "I have no idea whether he says, I don't know if Lysias's ideas are good. I was only paying attention to sort of the words, the organization, the examples. I don't know whether he's right or wrong, but I says I was only really paying attention to I wasn't paying attention to what the essay was about. I was paying attention to how it was written." Um, he says, "Phaedrus, you're going to be able." He says, "You're better at this than I am." He's kidding. Socrates is better at everything. So Socrates says, "Phaedrus, you're better at this than I am. I'm going to let you. You can figure out whether the ideas are right or wrong. I was only paying attention to the organization and the words, and that's the only thing I feel qualified to speak on." And so Socrates says, "Right, I was only attended to the rhetorical manner, the words." Oh, speaking of which, I forgot to mention this last time. Rhetoric, right? I taught you about rhetoric, which is using words in a persuasive way. And I mentioned that this class is called Composition 1, but that at other colleges it's called Rhetoric or Rhetoric and Composition, shortened to RetComp, because of the same thing. It's about using words to persuade. Some of you, and I think I said last time, rhetoric is a word that a lot of people don't know, but my students do know one thing. They know the phrase rhetorical question. And many of my some of you have heard the phrase rhetorical question, but you don't know what it means, or you know what it means. A rhetorical question is when somebody asks a question and they're not looking for an answer. They know the answer. Um, so if I say to somebody like, "What? You think I'm fucking stupid? Huh? You think I'm fucking stupid?" That's a rhetorical question. I'm not actually wondering, boy, am I stupid? I should ask this guy. He can help me out with this. I'm making a speech. So it's a question, but it's not really a question. It's a speech. I'm not asking for an answer. I'm yelling at somebody. So maybe if I'm yelling at somebody, I might be like, "Do you think I'm stupid? Huh? You think I'm fucking stupid?" Ah! And then I would attack them or something. I wouldn't actually attack them. I'm a nice guy. But the point is that rhetorical questions don't need answers. Why? Because they're not really questions. They're part of a speech. What is rhetoric? It's the art, the skill of giving good speeches. That's why it's called a rhetorical question, because it's the kind of question that appears in a speech. It's very different. When I ask you a question, is a hot dog a sandwich? I want an answer. But if I'm just giving a massive speech in front of a crowd full of people, nobody should raise their hand and answer me. It's a rhetorical question. It's part of rhetoric. It's part of my speech that I am giving. All right, cool. This is going good. All right, so let's see what else Socrates has to say. He says, "I was only paying attention to the rhetorical matter, and I was doubting whether this could have been defended even by Lysias himself." So he thinks it was a badly written speech. "I thought, though I speak under correction," meaning you can tell me if I'm wrong here, "that he repeated himself 2 or 3 times, either from want of words." Want is being used in an old-fashioned way here. It means lack of words. It actually makes sense if you think about it. If you want something, you don't have it. So a want of words is a lack of words. You don't have any words. So he doesn't know whether what Lysias says is true or not. He does, but he's pretending he doesn't. And he says here that he says, "I don't think it was very well organized. I thought, though I speak under correction, that he repeated himself 2 or 3 times, either from want of words," meaning this is what students do, right? They repeat themselves because they're supposed to hit a word count and they don't have enough words. They lack words. And so what do? They repeat themselves. He says, "I think he repeated himself, either from want or words or from want of pains," meaning he couldn't think of words or he was lazy. Also, it appeared to me ostentatiously to exult in showing how well he could say the same thing 2 or 3 ways. Ostentatiously means to show off. To be ostentatious is to show off. You see, he's showing off. He's showing off how he can say this. Isn't it fancy that he can say the same thing 2 or 3 different ways? And by the way, that is a lot of what we do in this class. We learn to say the same thing 2 or 3 ways. When you're reading very difficult things, that's a skill that comes in handy a lot. Because it's hard to understand. So you try to translate it into other words, and sometimes that's hard to understand. So you translate it into other words, and then you're like, oh, that's what it means. So we do that, like Lysias does. But Socrates thinks this is a bad paper. He doesn't like Lysias' speech. He thinks Lysias is repeating himself because he's either lazy or he can't think of anything else to say and is trying to make it longer. And he also says, Socrates also says that he's just showing off. This isn't a real truthful essay that's getting us to the truth. He's just showing off how good he is with words, that he can say the same thing 2 or 3 different ways. Phaedrus is very upset. Phaedrus loves this speech, and this has hurt his feelings. Nonsense, Socrates. What you call repetition was the special merit of the speech. That was the good thing. For he omitted no topic of which the subject rightly allowed, and I do not think that anyone could have spoken better or more exhaustively. Exhaustively means he said everything there was to say on the subject. So Lysias's point, Phaedrus says, this was a great speech. The fact that he could say something so many times, that's what he liked about it. So these two are now discussing the value. You can imagine this is like 2 teachers debating over what grade to give a student paper. By the way, that will happen. At the end of this semester, when you write your 4th and final paper for me, it will be graded by 2 professors. So ridiculously, people are going to have to, it's going to be like a trade and grade situation where professors have to, more than one professor will look at your final paper and they may have a little debate, just like Socrates and Phaedrus are doing here. Okay, let's see what else we got. Socrates says, there I cannot go along with you. He doesn't think it was very good. Ancient sages, men and women, who have spoken and written these things, would rise up in judgment against me if out of complacence I assented to you. Meaning, if out of sort of laziness I agreed with you, ancient people who are smart would come up and beat me up. Phaedrus says, who are they? And where did you hear anything better than this? Like, if you don't think this is good, what are you talking about? Like, where did you hear something better? Now, one of the things to keep in mind here is that Phaedrus is quite young and Socrates is quite old. So Socrates has seen a lot of things. This comes up a lot between students and professors, where students will say, this is the greatest movie I've ever seen. How many movies have you seen? And people will go, I've seen 1,000 movies. Yeah, are they all recent movies? Because a lot of people who are older have seen not only a lot of movies, but movies going back decades. And so my students, for example, will come to me and they say, Professor, did you see this new movie? It's so awesome. It's my favorite movie. And I have to say, well, I didn't really like it that much because I've seen other older movies that I thought were much better. And the reason that you like it is because you haven't seen enough movies. And if you had seen as many movies as I had, you would probably think this isn't very good. Now, I'm not really that snobby. There's lots of modern movies that I like, but my point is sometimes a student will get very excited about a movie and I don't like it as much. I've seen it before because it may be a ripoff of something from 20 or 30 years ago, but students don't know that. Actually, the better example, students are a bad example here. The better example is little kids. When little children watch movies, they love the movie. But as an adult, I'm like, oh, the only reason the kids like this movie is because they're 8 years old and they've seen like 7 movies. What the hell do they know? But my film class, it comes up a lot. I'm thinking about it because of my film class. Because I teach a lot of older movies. So Phaedrus is young, and he's very excited about it, and he wants to know, where did you hear anything better than this? I am sure I must have heard, but at the moment I do not remember from whom. Perhaps from Sappho the Fair, or Anacreon the Wise, or possibly from a prose writer. Why do I say so? Why, because I perceive that my bosom is full, and that I could make another speech as good as that of Lysias, and different. Now I am certain this is not an invention of my own, who am well aware that I know nothing, and therefore I can only infer that I have been filled through the ears, that should be ears, like a pitcher from the waters of another, though I've actually forgotten in my stupidity who was my informant. So he says, I can feel myself being inspired by magical forces. I think I can give an even better speech than this. And Socrates is kidding, but he's going to give a bigger, better speech on the same subject. So we're going to hear this whole thing again, but from Socrates this time. Socrates does not agree with Lysias, but he's going to make the same argument Lysias did, but better, to show that Lysias isn't that smart. I'll see you in the next video.